Well, today we're going to be talking about some important planetary transits that are going to be affecting us for the month of July. And I expect July to be just as interesting as June was. As many of you were watching the news, there were several important events that happened in June. Number one, there was almost a coup that happened in Russia. And then number two, there was this incident of this submersible imploding on its way down to the Titanic. And I'm actually going to take a moment to talk about that because I do feel like it relates to the planetary transits that are going to happen in July. For those of you that are new to my channel, make sure you like and subscribe. I practice Vedic sidereal astrology for those of you that are new to this. It's not Western tropical astrology, so you want to make sure you go to the appropriate calculator online. Also, my goal is 10,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much for your support, by the way. For those of you that purchase readings, it really does help support my channel and what I do. Thank you so much. If you're interested in your own personal private reading, check for details down below. There's a special discount, endless summer discount. Use code name Thor at checkout for 40% off, and you will be able to get a really nice discount for your reading. All right. So before we go into the presentation here, I did want to bring up this idea of what happened with this submersible, because I do feel like this idea of these, this wealthy people buying this ride, uh, which was apparently $250,000 a piece, to be on this submersible and go visit the Titanic wreck, is really symbolic of what's going on at this time in world history. And it's this idea of class struggle and this idea of this great wealth divide that's really emerging, and really what is what the Saturn transit in the sign of Aquarius is really demonstrating. So more and more we're seeing these larger and larger wealth disparities. And for a lot of people, it's actually kind of ridiculous that, when people have this extreme wealth, they're visiting, Titanic wrecks in inherently dangerous conditions, and then they're off flying rockets into space. Meanwhile, most people are, having trouble affording the groceries. They're having trouble making ends meet. They're having trouble paying the rent because there's a housing crisis. So more and more we're seeing this disparity and this wealth divide, and I feel like that's what's really going to be flavoring the month of July. Okay, so this idea of the Titanic submersible and it imploding and just the story behind that is kind of a theme that's going to be carrying with us. Let's go back to the slideshow because I'm actually going to talk about the actual transits that are taking place. So July 1st, really what we're going to see is right away, there's going to be some strong energy. We got Mars. It's going from the sign of Cancer into the sign of Leo. And in fact, there's going to be a lot of focus on the sign of Leo for the month of July. There's a lot of things happening in Leo. Okay. And Leo's all about being an individual. It's all about standing out in a crowd. It's the opposite of the sign of Aquarius. This is why I feel like it's going to be quite a difficult month, as we have Mars and Leo. It's going to be opposing Saturn in the sign of Aquarius, and Saturn is retrograde, by the way. So we have these two fierce planets. We have Saturn and Mars really competing with each other with these very different energies. We have this energy that wants to kind of keep things static. They want the old order to stay the same. And for many people, it's not working. And then we have this Mars and Leo, which is all about this new innovation, these new ideas, this individualism that's coming into play that is kind of, bucking up against this system. Aquarius and Capricorn would more represent what this, the corporate system and institutions really represent. So that's going to be flavoring the month. So Mars and Leo, I feel like people are going to be feeling a lot more motivated in the month of July to really speak their minds. We're going to see a lot of people getting together. We're going to see a lot more political rallies. We're going to see a lot more political action. We're going to see a lot more people really just getting out there and sharing their voice. Okay, we got full moon in Sagittarius on July 3rd. That's in the natural ninth house. There's this idea of knowledge and dharma that's really coming to people's awareness. One of the things about this class struggle that I'm talking about that, the month of June kind of demonstrated was this idea that, you know, this new understanding and this new awareness that's really coming into the consciousness. I was talking with some people earlier in the week, and we discussed how as the consciousness and the awareness has been growing on the planet, people have been realizing that the old way of doing things, there was a certain degree of exploitation that took place with the old order and the old system. And people on a lot of levels were not even aware of that exploitation that was taking place. Maybe employers were having people come in for extra hours and people weren't getting paid for it, or different little things that people just kind of accepted out of desperation of having a job. Well, those things are getting highlighted now. So there is this line in the sand that's being drawn. And even though this is an astrology video, I do feel like this Saturn retrograde in Aquarius is bringing up the everyman, what's going on with the average person. Aquarius represents the masses. It represents the common people, the people that are getting together and organizing. And with Saturn going through the sign of Aquarius, there is this idea of this idea that there's this oppression of some sorts that's happening on the every person, whether that be economic, spiritual, emotional. There's this kind of oppressive energy, which is representative by Saturn being in the sign of Aquarius. July 7th, Venus is going to enter Leo. And I do feel like this is going to be important because Venus is going to be going retrograde for the month of July. And that's on July 23rd. Remember, Venus represents agreements. And it represents this agreement that society may have of where everyone kind of agrees on this concept of how we want our reality to work. Well, Venus going retrograde in the nakshatra of Maga is very important. Okay. So Maga is ruled by Ketu. So there's this idea of this disillusion of agreement. There's this lack of agreement. People are not agreeing with the status quo, the way things are going. And over the next several months, while Venus is retrograde till September, there is going to be this, we're in search of a new agreement for the public. Okay. We need new ideas. We need a new agreement. We need, in a way, FDR came out with the New Deal. There's almost kind of this idea of we need a new deal, because things aren't working the way they are. Let me take you to the next slide here. So I do want to explore this idea of Mars and Saturn being in opposition for the month of July. I mean, this starts July 1st. This is day number 1. And remember, what Saturn represents and Mars represent are basically two diametrically opposed things. So Saturn is going to be retrograde in Aquarius all month. So Saturn's stronger. In Vedic astrology, when a planet is retrograde, it's a stronger planet. Mars represents the primal force of nature. Okay, so in a lot of ways, Mars represents like the law of the jungle. It represents anarchy, anger, sudden events. It's a threat to the social order in a lot of ways. Now, there's positive uses for Mars. Somebody who is a very devout monk or yogi or yogini, they might have a strong Mars because they have to take these very strict vows and these very strict disciplines to really get to where they need to be. But on a general level, Mars represents this primal force. Saturn represents the opposite. It's more about stability, the law, conformity, and in bad cases, it can represent oppression. Okay. And above all, Saturn wants things to be stable, but it's not necessarily the best or most optimal reality for everybody. Okay. Saturn's just more about stability. It's not necessarily, bringing the best solution to everybody. So Saturn is okay with a nobility. Saturn is okay with an aristocracy. Saturn's okay with a an organized, capitalistic system where the wealth is mostly funneled to 1% or less than 1%. Okay, so Saturn's okay with that because that's the system we have. Now, this month, I feel like, and especially with the Venus going retrograde, we got Mars going in July 1st to the sign of Leo. And then when Venus goes retrograde, I feel like this is really when we're going to start seeing more of these movements. And also, we could be seeing some difficulty in the economy as well. Okay, because uh, Mars itself, with aspecting the sign of Aquarius, Mars is the natural eighth lord, and eighth lord represents upheaval, and it's the represents the cycle of death and rebirth. So likely, I feel we're going to see more individuals, really challenging the social, economic, political order. For example, protests, political demonstrations. But there's also this new phenomenon. If many of you have been following like TikTok and other YouTube channels of quiet quitting, we're likely going to be seeing more of this quiet quitting, and quiet quitting and not returning to the office. These are all little symptoms of this class warfare that is essentially happening. Okay, class struggle. So it's difficulty, and there's people are finding little ways to try to protest what's going on. Okay, they're protesting that people don't have the means to live well anymore. That the cost of food and the cost of housing has went up so much. We're also going to see individuals asserting their rights more, because Leo is all about, like, look at me, I have rights, I'm an individual. Where Saturn, if you watch Star Trek, Saturn represents like the Borg. Okay, just this collective mindset, but not necessarily best for everybody. It's kind of like oppressive. So the whole problem right now is, while Saturn is in the sign of Aquarius till March of 2025, institutions, corporations, governments, because they're represented by Saturn is a very slow moving planet. So it's very slow to change things. And any of you that have spent time working in a corporation, you know that when they change policies, they do it like reluctantly. They don't want to change policies. Even if the policies are very bad, even if they get a lot of complaints, they get a lot of, the staff members don't like it, the customers don't like it, there's this inherent slowness to corporations. They don't want to change. So even in the face of tremendous upheaval, these organizations reluctantly change. They're trying to preserve the old world order. Okay, the system that's really not working for everybody at this point. And I already brought up this idea of the threat of sudden economic events increases as Mars is the natural eighth lord, in opposition to the stability of markets, because Aquarius is represented by the 11th house. Okay. So I feel like this idea of class struggle is important to talk about, because, we really saw it last month. And, I've been seeing a lot of content creators come out and talk about this whole idea of, you know, this submersible going down to the Titanic. On a certain level, it's kind of ridiculous, and they avoided all these safety protocols, and, they just wanted to go and essentially, have a stunt, and just be able to say that they saw the Titanic wreckage. So we kind of in this strange time where there's this wealth divide, that people are doing these really absurd things, and meanwhile, everyday people are struggling. And I think we're going to see more of this play out. In fact, we're going to see this play out a lot over the next 2 years with the Saturn transit. But month of July, we're going to see more of this, and we could see some negative economic news as well, or fluctuations there. For those of you that are watching my video, make sure you comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you think it's going to be a good month? Do you think it's going to be more of a negative month? Let me know, and I will see you in the next video.